So here's a big question for you. How does a company that literally builds the metal skeleton of our modern world turn itself into a champion for a greener planet? I mean, can an industrial behemoth really go green? Let's get into it.
All right, we're going to start with just one number, 84 billion. Now, what on earth could this massive figure possibly represent for a company that's all about mining, refining, and smelting metal?
Well, that is the number of cans recycled every single year by Hindalco's subsidiary, Novelis. Yeah, you heard that right. It makes them the world's largest aluminum recycler. And right away, that kind of reframes the whole story, doesn't it? Hindalco isn't just digging stuff out of the ground. They are a huge central player in the circular economy.
But to really get a handle on the scale of their green ambitions, first, you gotta understand their sheer industrial might.
You know, what's really wild here is just how integrated they are. I mean, they control the entire chain, which gives them this incredible control over quality and, of course, costs. They're doing everything from mining bauxite, that's the raw stuff for aluminum, to refining it, smelting it, and then turning it into finished products. And they do the same thing for copper, supplying over half of all of India's needs. They even pull out precious metals like gold and silver along the way. It's a completely self-contained powerhouse. And that kind of scale, well, it translates into being a real force on the world stage. In aluminum through Novelis, they're the biggest rolling and recycling company in the world, period. And in copper, they're a major player, supplying critical parts to massive organizations like the Indian Railways. Their metals are, quite literally, what our modern world is built on.
But this is where the story gets a little complicated. You know, being an industrial giant like that comes with a pretty significant environmental footprint. And that brings us to the core dilemma they're facing.
Which, of course, brings us right back to the central question of this whole explainer. Is it actually possible for a company whose business is, by its very nature, resource-intensive, to pivot and become a leader in sustainability?
So you've got this fundamental tension, this real push and pull. On one side, the green transition absolutely needs what Hindalco makes. You can't have electric vehicles or modern airplanes without lightweight aluminum. And you can forget about green energy infrastructure without high-purity copper. But on the other side, making those metals traditionally means sky-high GHG emissions, using tons of fresh water, and creating waste. So how do you possibly solve that contradiction?
Well, it seems like Hindalco's answer is a multi-part strategy, and it starts with a pretty fundamental shift in how they see themselves and their products.
They've rolled out this new brand positioning, engineering better futures. And look, this isn't just some catchy marketing slogan. It really signals a strategic move away from being just a company that supplies materials to becoming one that provides engineered solutions. They're basically baking innovation right into their identity.
And this isn't just talk. The proof is right there in their development pipeline. They're cooking up 30 new chemical products. They're creating special carbon coatings for lithium-ion battery foils that actually improve power and make batteries last longer. They're even using artificial intelligence in their logistics and creating digital twins of their power plants to slash energy use. This is seriously high-tech stuff.
Okay, so innovation is cool, but let's get real. The big question is, are they actually backing all this up with cold hard cash and real action on their environmental, social, and governance, or ESG performance?
And the financial commitment is just massive. In a single fiscal year, they spent over 2,000 crore rupees, that's over 20 billion rupees on environmental goals. And notice how it's split almost perfectly down the middle. Half is capital spending on new greener equipment, and the other half is revenue spending to run their existing operations more cleanly. That shows this commitment is baked into their entire budget.
And you can see that investment is actually paying off. Look at this steady, consistent drop in the amount of energy they need to produce 1 metric ton of aluminum. Year after year after year. They're getting more efficient. And at their massive scale, even a small improvement like this means a huge reduction in their overall carbon footprint.
And we see the exact same story with water conservation. This is absolutely critical, especially since a lot of their plants are in regions where water is scarce. They've managed to cut both their total water use and, even more importantly, their fresh water use. These are real, tangible results in managing a super vital resource.
So they're spending the money, they're making progress, but what does the rest of the world think about all this? Well, that brings us to this really powerful statistic.
For 3 years in a row, Hindalco has been ranked in the top 1% of the entire global aluminum industry by the S&P Global Sustainability Yearbook. Now, this isn't some internal award they gave themselves. This is a globally recognized benchmark, and it puts them at the absolute peak of their industry for ESG performance. That's a huge deal.
Okay, but here's the ultimate question for any public company, right? It always comes down to this. Does this intense focus on sustainability end up hurting the bottom line? Or is it actually possible to be green and still grow?
Well, if we look at their financials, we see a story of resilience. Sales and revenue have been growing consistently. And yeah, operating profit took a bit of a hit from market pressures back in 2023, but it's stabilized since then. It shows they can handle the costs that come with this massive green transformation. And this right here, this shows some serious financial discipline. While they're making all these huge investments, their debt-to-equity ratio has actually gotten better. In simple terms, that means they have less debt compared to the value of their company. It gives them a stronger, more resilient financial foundation. That's the sign of a very well-managed ship.
You know, this quote from the company really just brings it all together, doesn't it? Their new identity isn't just a tagline. It's a declaration of their core strategy to weave innovation, sustainability, and solid financial performance into the very fabric of everything they do.
So, that leaves us with this final thought. Hindalco seems to be proving that it might just be possible for a heavy industry giant to not only survive the green transition, but to actually lead it, and to thrive financially while doing so. So as the world demands more and more from its biggest corporations, the real question is this the new blueprint for success?